If you have a grievance, you are free to depart. This is our abode. I eventually lost my composure at the individual in front of me who was shouting at me. Geez, I truly accomplished it, didn't I? I pondered for a moment, but I had no remorse. My name is Susan, 33 years old. I reside with my spouse John and our 3-year-old daughter Lily. I commenced working part-time at a local grocery store after Lily began attending kindergarten. Although my days are unremarkable, I have grown to appreciate my ordinary existence. However, for the past 6 months, something has been troubling me. Hey Susan, this is a fashionable ensemble. You should have been cautious when laundering it. The person presenting me with the slightly crumpled garments complained. She is John's sibling and my sister-in-law. Her name is Patricia. She is single, and as far as I recollect, she is 40 years old. Huh? I was unaware. It was simply mixed in with the usual laundry. Huh? I was unaware. It was simply mixed in with the regular laundry, so I didn't notice. I would assume you could discern that it is a costly one merely by inspecting it. But I suppose you wouldn't comprehend, being fond of Dawn brands, Susan. When she uttered that, she retreated to her quarters with an expression that suggested it couldn't be helped. Well, then you should cleanse it yourself, I murmured under my breath. It was always like this. Patricia appeared to assume that I would attend to matters for her. Even after I had laundered her clothes, she treated me in this manner. It was so exasperating, and for some reason, I was even preparing the lunch of my sister-in-law. Are you preparing Lily's lunch, correct? Then could you also prepare mine? I attempted to decline, suggesting that she should make her own, but she responded by saying that she had never made lunch before, as her mother always did it for her. I don't care, I am not your mother. I don't care, I am not your mother. Then, this foolish sister-in-law took my daughter's lunchbox to the office without permission, even though I had made it early in the morning. I lost my temper. Couldn't you tell that it belonged to Lily just by looking at it? Lily was crying this morning because her favorite lunchbox was missing. Despite my anger, she simply responded, I thought you had made it for me since it was on the table. I'm sorry, with a silly grin on her face. What's with that expression? It's not cute at all, I thought to myself. By the way, her feedback on the lunch was, I'm on a diet, so it was just the right amount. She could have at least said thank you. I suggested that she could just buy lunch, but she replied that she didn't want to because it would be nutritionally unbalanced. As a form of retaliation, I made her lunches filled with frozen meals a few times, but it didn't seem to bother her. It was clear that she simply wanted to make her own life easier. Enough. 6 months ago, we started living in this house with my in-laws. Since we moved here, I have found myself becoming irritated much more frequently. Even if I told John about it, he didn't seem to take it seriously. While I begrudgingly did the housework, my mother-in-law, leaning on her cane, started a conversation. In conversation, she had experienced the loss of her spouse approximately 10 years ago and had been employed on a full-time basis ever since. She had a slightly elevated blood pressure, which ultimately resulted in her experiencing a stroke one day. Fortunately, she survived, but was left with a minor paralysis on the right side of her body. With the assistance of a walking cane and leg brace, she was still able to ambulate. However, maintaining her job became too difficult, leading her to resign from her long-standing employment. At present, she relies on her pension for support. It is truly fortunate that you have arrived. I express my gratitude, Patricia, as always. I apologize, she remarked. My mother-in-law possessed excellent language skills and could engage in conversations like this. Whenever my sister-in-law and I had a disagreement, she would consistently apologize to me in this manner. In response to my self-centered sister-in-law, my mother-in-law would frequently state, enough is enough, you should depart immediately. Yet my sister-in-law would simply reply, huh? Why, it's convenient to live here since it's close to work. All right, I will take it into consideration. indicating that she wasn't truly taking the matter seriously. My mother-in-law was never an old-fashioned bully, and she would always express her gratitude towards me. Even my daughter Lily was deeply fond of my mother-in-law. When I initially received news that my mother-in-law had collapsed, I could never have anticipated that things would unfold in this manner. This was because my sister also resided with her, and despite my sister-in-law having a job, my mother-in-law neither required constant bed rest nor around-the-clock nursing care. I simply believed that I would occasionally visit and offer assistance when necessary. However, my spouse had a different perspective. Allow us to relocate to my parents' residence. Following my mother-in-law's collapse and a day at work, my husband informed me of this decision. What? Taken aback, I gazed at him in astonishment, and he stated, "I have already reached out to the real estate agent and will terminate the lease by the end of the following month. Can you simply spring this on me and expect us to move in together all of a sudden? Wouldn't your mother disapprove?" I was taken aback and expressed my shock to him. Despite my objections, my husband reassured me it will be fine, and it is my childhood home after all. I will be comfortable there, and I believe my mother would be delighted to live with her son and granddaughter. How laid back he could be. Well, it may suit you, John, since it is your childhood home. Lily, would you like to reside with Grandma? My husband asked me this, and our innocent daughter replied, "Yes, Lily adores Grandma." At that moment, I did not anticipate that my sister-in-law would be so difficult, and I genuinely believed it would be challenging to leave my mother-in-law in Patricia's care. Patricia must be facing a difficult time handling everything alone. Let us all contribute and assist until things settle down, I suggested to my husband. In response to my words, my husband seemed perplexed and said, "Huh? Assist? Well, yes, of course." His response was vague, and I wasn't certain if he truly understood or not. And that is how events unfolded. And before we knew it, we had relocated to my spouse's ancestral abode. As I had anticipated, my mother-in-law displayed a complex expression. On the first day we moved in, there was a noticeable expression on her face. "I assure you, I am perfectly fine, you know. Susan, the sudden move? You must have disapproved of it, correct?" She informed me with an indescribable look on her face. Upon hearing those words, I immediately realized that my spouse had made the decision to move in with his mother against her wishes. However, one can adapt to circumstances, and despite our initially awkward interactions, my mother-in-law and I gradually developed a friendly relationship through ongoing conversations. She willingly assisted with dinner and household chores, stating that it served as a form of therapy. My parents' residence is located far from the city center, and it deeply touched me. My mother and I used to cook together in a similar manner. It brings back nostalgic memories. Lily will also lend a hand. Ever since she started attending kindergarten, my daughter Lily's vocabulary has expanded. She plays with many friends, and her appetite has noticeably increased. Lately, she has become more assertive, and when her favorite clothes are being washed or she dislikes her hairstyle, she often wears a sulky expression. Even that behavior is endearing, and I can see that she is growing more independent. Today, I am taking a break from kindergarten, even when she puts on a pouty face. "Oh, Lily, you look exceptionally adorable today, just like a princess." When her grandmother tells her this, she often brightens up and happily goes to kindergarten. My self-absorbed husband and sister-in-law Patricia continue to be a cause for concern. But I have started to believe that life living at my in-laws' place may not be as terrible as I initially thought. I never could have anticipated what would transpire next. Hey, now that we're residing in the house I grew up in, perhaps you should consider increasing my monthly allowance. One day, my spouse actually made this proposal. I didn't quite grasp the meaning behind his words. "Huh? What are you implying?" It's rather perplexing. As I voiced my confusion, my husband looked bewildered and responded, Well, since we're living here now, we don't have to pay rent or utilities, right? So you can allocate that money to me as my allowance. He said something quite foolish like that. Furthermore, my husband found it peculiar that his allowance remained the same, despite our household income increasing since I started working part-time. We've returned to my childhood home, and everything is provided for us. He even mentioned that. What? Everything is free. What is he talking about? Contemplating to myself, I couldn't help but wonder if it was me or if my husband had lost his mind. I truly couldn't comprehend his reasoning. If I had to be honest, I was convinced that it was my husband who was being absurd. Well, it is true that this house belongs to your mother, but we are living here and often contribute towards groceries and daily necessities. The house we resided in was owned by my mother-in-law and had already been fully paid off by my late father-in-law. It is now her property. I believe that the utilities, home maintenance fund, property tax, and fire insurance are covered by my mother-in-law and sister-in-law Patricia. Since I handle most of the shopping, the expenses for groceries and daily necessities are deducted from our household budget. In light of this, my mother-in-law would express regret after shopping, asking, "How much did it cost? Let me pay this time." However, I declined her offer. While our expenses may have slightly decreased compared to when we were renting, the addition of 2 more people certainly increased our food expenses. Whenever we had the extra money, we would graciously save it for our daughter Lily's future. Additionally, I would prepare lunch for my husband every day, and he rarely ate out. My husband, who didn't have many friends, would spend his holidays at home, mostly playing video games. Did he really need an allowance? I pondered, but nevertheless, I gave him a reasonable amount. I couldn't comprehend why he was so dissatisfied. However, when my husband John realized that our household was covering all the living expenses, he muttered, "Why? Why do we have to contribute to the living expenses? This is Mom's house, isn't it? What is his issue? The one who is strange is him, not me." As I contemplated this while preparing for our daughter's kindergarten the next day, I started hearing a commotion coming from my mother-in-law's room. Curiosity got the better of me, and I peered into the room, only to witness John angrily questioning, "Why? Why do we have to contribute to the living expenses?" He seemed oblivious to the fact that it was someone else's problem. My mother-in-law, instead of reprimanding him, simply stared blankly, as if she had given up on everything. Her eyes reflected a sense of resignation. When John noticed my presence, he over to my place. "I've got something important to discuss." John's voice echoed through the speakerphone. My mother-in-law glanced at me with a mischievous smile and replied, "Sure, John. We'll be there soon." As she hung up the phone, a sense of curiosity filled the room. A few hours later, we arrived at John's house. He greeted us at the door with a warm smile, but there was something off about his demeanor. He led us into the living room, where he nervously fidgeted with his hands. "Sit down," he said, motioning towards the couch. As we settled in, John began to explain the reason for our gathering. He revealed that he had been struggling financially and couldn't keep up with the expenses anymore. To my surprise, he suggested that we no longer needed to contribute to the living expenses. It was as if a weight had been lifted off his shoulders, and he seemed rather pleased with himself. While John spoke, I couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. On one hand, I was relieved that the financial burden would be lifted. On the other hand, I couldn't help but question my decision to marry someone who appeared to lack judgment. As these thoughts swirled in my mind, I realized that this situation could lead to others perceiving me as a negligent wife who refused to contribute. I imagined myself having to defend my actions to my mother-in-law and relying solely on John for support. The anxiety started to creep in. Just as I was about to voice my concerns, my mother-in-law interrupted with a chuckle. Susan, shall we have some tea?" she said, diverting the conversation. It was her way of signaling that there was more to this story. Curiosity piqued, I followed her into the kitchen. As we prepared dinner together, my daughter Lily joined us, eager to help make her favorite dish, dumplings. We laughed and bonded over the process, each creating our own unique shapes. As we worked, Lily eventually grew bored and wandered off to play with her toys in the next room. It was then that my mother-in-law's phone rang, displaying John's name on the screen. "Oh, I wonder if he forgot something," she mused. With sticky hands, she deftly answered the call on speakerphone. "Hello, Mom. Hey, come over to my place. I've got something important to discuss." John's voice echoed through the room. My mother-in-law exchanged a knowing glance with me, a silent understanding passing between us. The truth was about to be revealed, along with a certain plan she had in mind. It is important to answer the telephone politely. What an impolite man. This situation is uncomfortable. I glanced at my mother-in-law, who was silently staring at her phone. Assist with the shopping occasionally. On a holiday, my mother-in-law compelled my husband and sister-in-law to go shopping. Just as I was about to respond to John on the phone, "John, did Mom pick up the phone?" I heard my sister-in-law's voice. "No, I couldn't hear anything." "Do you think Lily tampered with it?" Upon hearing John say that, my sister-in-law started saying something alarming. However, both my mother-in-law and I turned pale as we listened to what came next. Our hands were sticky, but we quickly pressed the record button. The call ended after some time. After washing my hands, I made a call to a specific location. "We have returned." Eventually, John and my sister-in-law, who were unaware, came back home. "I'm back." "Wait, what are you two doing?" It's no wonder that my husband John and my sister-in-law looked so surprised. That's because my mother-in-law and I, with troubled expressions, were sitting at the table in the living room, glaring at the two of them. "Huh. What's wrong with you two? You're frightening me." My sister-in-law uttered something like that. "Please sit down. We need to discuss something with the two of you. You're scaring me." My sister-in-law said something similar. "Please sit down. We need to discuss something with the two of you." My mother-in-law said, then gestured to me. I suddenly nodded and then played the recording of their conversation that I had captured earlier. Nevertheless, it seems that we cannot access our mother's finances unless she is no longer with us, correct? My sister-in-law conversed with my spouse John in a relaxed manner, as if she was contemplating what to eat for dinner. Is that indeed the case? That is unfortunate. You mentioned discovering $50,000. That is why I came here. The most troubling part is that our mother is quite cunning. It is undoubtedly our father's inheritance. We only received a mere $1,000 for him. Their discussion continued. Finally, my sister-in-law remarked, "She is extremely slow, which is frustrating, isn't it? Similar to when she descends the stairs slowly. Don't you sometimes have the urge to nudge her?" My sister-in-law made a terrible comment, and my foolish spouse, John, agreed. I completely understand. The call abruptly ended there. Both of them appeared visibly uneasy, clearly unaware that we were eavesdropping. Upon hearing their conversation, I felt a concern for my mother-in-law's safety and immediately sought advice from the authorities. However, they did not seem very helpful, stating that it was a family matter. After the call, my mother-in-law stated, "I comprehend your feelings very well. I have been contemplating this for some time now. I will sell this house and relocate." The two of them were taken aback by this revelation, their eyes wide open. Only my unintelligent husband and sister-in-law have such foolish expressions. In reality, I have been discussing this matter with my mother-in-law for quite some time now. The main issue was my sister-in-law. Until I heard about this from my mother-in-law, I had assumed my sister-in-law was contributing to the decision-making process. In terms of sharing the costs of living, it appears that my sister-in-law has not contributed any money to the household since she began working. It seems that she still holds the belief that household chores are solely the responsibility of the mother, and she often complains, stating that she can spend her hard-earned money however she pleases. Despite this, she continues to indulge in expensive beauty treatments, vacations, and luxury items. If she truly has an abundance of money, it would be fair for her to either move out or contribute to the household expenses. In the past, when my father-in-law was alive, he would scold my sister-in-law for her behavior. During that time, she would occasionally pretend to help with housework, but it didn't last long before she returned to her previous habits of not contributing financially. Even after my father-in-law passed away, my sister-in-law took complete advantage of my mother-in-law and did as she pleased. However, my father suggested that I save my money instead of paying living expenses, and now that I have started working, it seems strange to suddenly ask me to contribute to the household. I had a feeling that my sister-in-law would cause trouble. There is nothing unusual about expecting her to save money and move out. After raising my children, I had hoped for a peaceful life. How many years has it been since you started working? You haven't contributed a single cent to the household, so you must be quite financially well off by now. My sister-in-law appeared frustrated and unable to find a response. She simply stated that she has a job. Relocating suddenly can be quite troublesome. To make matters worse, my sister-in-law, lost in her delusions, began uttering such statements. "Why would I bring you along? How foolish! You have lived as you pleased up until now. Please feel free to continue doing so." Finally comprehending the seriousness of my mother-in-law, both of them started to panic. "What about the $50,000? Wasn't that our father's money, Mom? Have you been concealing shares of the inheritance? I might inform the authorities." These were the words of my foolish sister-in-law. When my mother-in-law fell ill, she must have discovered the bank book on her own. My husband and I discussed our mother-in-law, and the conversation somehow shifted to the $50,000. They probably thought they would receive a portion as well, which is why my husband hastily moved back in. Their lack of intelligence gave me a headache. With a triumphant expression, my mother-in-law calmly stated, "That was my money from when I was single. Your father had no involvement with it. You two have been making a commotion about the inheritance, but you foolish children never let me save any money." My mother-in-law informed me that my father-in-law's favorite phrase was, "How long do I have to keep working?" Prior to marrying me, my husband John lived in the same manner as my sister-in-law, which greatly surprised me. I recall when we were searching for an apartment, he would ask foolish questions like, "What is a security deposit? A key fee? Homeowner's insurance? Aren't utility bills typically around?" I regretted my previous decision to pay $30 per month. It seemed that our conversation had disturbed Lily, who was sleeping in the adjacent room. With a drowsy expression, Lily remarked, "If someone does something wrong, they should apologize, correct? Can Papa and my aunt do that, since they are adults?" Lily glanced at John and my sister-in-law and commented, "This amused me," which appeared to upset my sister-in-law, who then inquired, "What is so amusing? You must have said something to Mom." In response, my mother-in-law intervened, urging us to stop. However, I calmly replied, "I laughed because I found it amusing. I thought my daughter Lily was displaying more maturity than you." I calmly continued, "I do the laundry and make lunch, but I receive no appreciation from the two of you. Lily can say thank you, can't she? Why can't you utter a single word? Sister-in-law, are you an infant?" I may have overstepped a bit, but my usual irritation erupted into words. "Aren't you ashamed to make me wash your tasteless underwear? Where has your sense of shame gone? It would be better for you to move out and find it." As I spoke nonchalantly, my sister-in-law, with a flushed face, retorted, "If you have any complaints, leave. This is our house. Take that bothersome child and leave." At this point, I had reached my limit. "Be quiet. You should depart. You, such a fool." I shouted with such force that my throat hurt, but I didn't regret it one bit. Earlier, after dinner, I was watching TV when a segment aired. Grown men and women residing in the number of childhood rooms is on the rise. Evidently, these individuals, despite being technically employed, spend all their salaries solely for their own enjoyment, continue to reside with their parents, and leave all household tasks to them like selfish creatures. The most frightening thing I experienced while watching a television program was not the content itself, but the sight of my husband John and my sister-in-law Patricia laughing uncontrollably at the segment questioning the existence of such people. Whether my sister-in-law was silenced by my intense gaze or by what I said, I do not know. A few days later, the day arrived when my mother-in-law decided to leave the house. "Well then, I am putting this place up for sale, so I would like both of you to move out by the end of the month," she declared before departing without revealing her destination. Who would have anticipated this turn of events? We now have to find a home for the four of us to live in. It would be ideal if we could find a lovely detached house. Upon hearing my husband's ridiculous statement, "If it's just the two of you, wouldn't a two-bedroom be enough?" I retorted. Ignoring them, John and my sister-in-law laughed off the situation. However, I persisted and said, "All right then, let's go, Lily. Shall we visit my mom?" In response to my words, my daughter Lily replied, "Yes, I'm happy because it's been a while since I've seen Grandpa and Grandma." She had a smile on her face. "Oh, what do you mean? He appeared flustered, as if he were unaware of the situation unfolding before him. His perplexity was rather amusing, leading me to declare, "I am ending our marriage." The mere thought of Lily and myself being pushed down the stairs one day fills me with fear. I can no longer continue living with you. In response to my statement, he stumbled over his words, saying, that was just a jest, correct, sis." My sister-in-law, possibly concerned about losing her potential housekeeper, replied, "My yes, let us live happily together." John even had the audacity to propose living with us in my parents' house, to which I retorted, "How can someone who cannot even care for their own parents possibly care for others?" That is what I conveyed to him. At that moment, the taxi we had summoned arrived. As Lily and I entered the vehicle, I remarked, "Please feel free to live your life as you desire." I departed from my in-laws' residence with a smile. In the background, I could hear John crying out, "Do not depart. Do not depart," like a child. In the past, I found such childishness endearing. However, now I can only perceive it as, wow, I feel remorseful. As for John and my sister-in-law, they ultimately ended up leasing a modest apartment without any security deposit or key money due to their limited savings. With minimal life skills and an unwillingness to lower their standard of living, they inevitably encountered difficulties. They should face those challenges. It is too late for regrets. By the way, the reason for my sister-in-law's noisy preparation of a lunchbox was an attempt to impress a coworker. Little did she know, the colleague already had a delightful girlfriend. Her packed lunches, which she didn't create herself, but instead became a subject of discussion in the office. There was a sudden shift from pleasant meals to something unpleasant in her lunchbox, which caused quite a commotion among her coworkers. It seems that she became the target of many jokes behind her back. I heard this story from a friend who happens to work at the same place as my sister-in-law. I couldn't help but find it amusing, although she is now a stranger to me and I couldn't care less. Now that I have returned to my parents' house, I live a peaceful life with the support of my parents and my daughter, Lily. My former husband, John, spent all his free time gaming and rarely interacted with Lily. So far, she hasn't shown any signs of loneliness or shed any tears. She has made new friends at her new preschool and appears to be happy attending there with a smile on her face. When Lily grows older, and if she desires to see her father, I will allow her to do so, as it is her right. My goal is to take care of my family and live each day without any regrets.